Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm. I'll be your host, and I'm joined with my good friend Doug Hagren. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Kirk, we're live and no guns pointed at us today. Like it is, seems like it is for everybody else. So as for now, before the election, we're still alive. And I'm warning you today. I'm getting political.
I'm in my bunker, Doug. I've got my shirt. I'm hiding up in Vermont, in the woods of Vermont, with my Vermonter shirt, and I'm hiding in plain sight from all the cuckoos out there. And there's plenty of them going to election. This is the pre-election special. Oh my God. I have to say as a disclaimer, we don't want to talk politics in the show because politics is virtually useless when it comes to investing. And it's not helpful. All it does is anger people or put you in an echo chamber. You either can hear what you want to hear or you get mad because you don't agree. We don't live in a society anymore that values contradictory opinions. And that's sad, frankly. It's sad that we can't have a rational conversation with the other side and have a discussion about something that is so important, like the direction of our country. I don't know when that went off the rails, but sometime in the last 10 years. And frankly, I think we need to get back to that. Yeah, I would toast to that, but I don't have any alcoholic beverage. I'm saving that for tomorrow during the election.
Well, I'm already offended by what you said, and therefore I'm out of here.
Doug, come back, please. What would we ever do without you?
A lot better, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Meanwhile, half our audience just left because they're pissed because Doug left. Anyway,
well, that's true. I've heard some of the love from the listeners out there, and thank you very much. I'm sure that so many of you are just holding on to every episode, just because I'm here. And of course, I'll say that to just get myself through another day. And, somebody's got to compliment me somewhere in life.
No, so Doug, you do a great job, Doug. We got a lot of love for Doug, and most of the hate's for me, but a lot of the love for Doug. So love or hate.
Good cop, bad cop.
We'll take it all. We'll take all the love and hate you can give. We don't care. Right. No, it was funny. I reminded me of that quote, the old Stripes. If you remember that movie Stripes, it was
fantastic.
When Bill Murray's girlfriend leaves at the beginning. And he's like, "Don't go, all the plants are going to die." It's like one of my favorite quotes. Like, nobody remembers that, but it's one of my favorite quotes. Don't go, all the plants are going to die. Oh, I got to love that 70s humor. And funny thing is, like, none of that humor survives nowadays. And here's another non-politics, politics sort of thing I love talking about is comedy. And how, like, back in the old days, and I'm not saying it's acceptable now, but, like, have you ever seen the movies from the 60s and 70s, like the James Bond movies, where, like, where James Bond just, like, smacks one of the women, and it's like, wow, like, we've come a long way. In
Silent Woman, yes.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like, I forget, like, Sean Connery, I forget which one it was, but he smacked her. I'm like, holy crap, did that just happen? But, like, back then, that was like acceptable airplay in TV. And it's like, wow. So things have changed for the better. I think we can all argue that's for the better. Men should not be smacking women. But I find it interesting because every once in a while, some of my female friends will send me something from like the 50s or 60s. And one of them sent me, like, last week, it was like the Housewife's Handbook, I think it was called. And if you read this thing, you'd be rolling on the floor laughing and shocked at the same time. Like, it is so far removed from reality that we live today. Right?
It's a comedy manual that wasn't comedy at the time.
Right. You'd read it and be like, this is hilarious. Like, and you're like, no, it was real. Like, this actually was something that people had back, and they're like, what? Like, no, that can't be real.
Well, we go back to the comedian the other day that made the comments about Puerto Rico, and I'm not saying condone the comments one way or another, but that's humor. Comedians have been saying these kind of jokes for forever, and if you go back and even look at 1970s Saturday Night Live, speaking of that, what they were doing in 1975 far exceeds anything that was stated that is getting everybody up in arms today. It's just, you talk about comedy, and for the most part, and you could see a little bit of this in the uproar that occurred last week whether you are pro-Democrat, pro-Republican. The reality is that unfortunately, we're in a society now where the comics are scared. They cannot, it's difficult for anybody to feel to speak their mind. Their entire living was built on the ability to pull out irony of the everyday world we live in. And now, who is it? You might know this, Kirk. You're usually good at quoting. Whoever said it made the quote that societies fall when comedy dies, or something like that, right? It's the last venue of the collapsed society, because humor is everything. It was always, back in the day, the entertainers were considered one of the lowest forms of occupation, because what they were was basically political antagonists. They were there stirring the pot on the ground, getting things riled up. I mean, you look at the pubs. Pubs were public houses where people got on their stands and they complained, they joked, they made fun of the aristocracy.
Yep.
Right? And
that was the jester's role. The jester, he was the only one who was allowed to dispute the king and to make fun of the king. The only one.
Absolutely.
And that was their role. And your point, and here's the interesting thing, right? Is when we are no longer, I mean, the comedian's job, as you said, it's to poke fun at everyday life. And I remember during COVID, they were not allowed to say certain things. A lot of them were scared. I mean, you got somebody like Bill Burr, who was hilarious, a Boston guy, absolutely hilarious. And he was pulling his punches. He even did a Netflix movie that was horrendous. Like, I was like, really? Like, halfway through the movie, I had to turn off. It was terrible. But it was all about being like woke and politically correct. And like, it castrated all the comedians, because they were not allowed to. I mean, Dave Chappelle, the GOAT. I mean, Dave Chappelle is the GOAT. All comedians consider him this. Like, he's one of the best comedians of all time.
Modern day Richard Pryor. He's been Richard Pryor, actually, before he died, one of the things that scared Dave Chappelle is Richard Pryor told him, "I'm passing the baton to you," which was an incredible amount of responsibility and pressure for him to carry that staff. That torch.
I mean, and he was getting canceled because of some of the stuff that he said. And I think if we can't, one of the challenges, to your point, Doug, as society falls when comedy fails, is that when we can't laugh at ourselves, then things have gotten a little too far out of whack. Yep. You have to be able to poke fun at yourselves and other people, and you have to be able to laugh, because if you don't, things have gotten way too serious. Mm-hmm. And I love comedy. I've always loved comedy, because it allows you to just get rid of the social norms and just laugh because it's funny. Doesn't matter if it's racist or homophobic or, genderphobic or whatever the heck people are afraid of nowadays. Just laugh because it's funny, right? Yes, society may disagree on certain things, but at the end of the day, you got to still be able to laugh about things and not be offended for other people, which I know is my big argument. You shouldn't get offended for other people.
Well, and I think this is part of the challenge too, Kirk, is back in the day, like I was saying, as a lot of comedy started, it started in the streets, right? And it made fun of the oppression of the aristocracy. And what unfortunately is challenging and problematic about the attack on comedy is it was a way for the common folk to even the playing field. If you could attack the aristocracy, you could bring them down to you. Now the problem is the common folk are attacking the common folk over comedy. And in a way, that actually creates more power for those above you, because they get to sit back and watch you infight. So just a message to anybody listening: always keep your sense of humor, because it's the last thing that nobody can ever take away from you, unless you take it away from yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very important to keep your sense about you, and we'll kind of dive in here a little bit into some stuff. But I do want to point out, because we are, 36 hours away from election results being closed. So,
oh, really? What's going on tomorrow?
Oh, there's the election tomorrow, Doug. Didn't you know?
I had no idea. I couldn't tell.
I didn't see any posts. Nobody put anything up. What's that? What's going on? I will say the hilarity of it. The sad part is in watching. I don't, as the listeners probably know by now, I don't watch corporate media, because it's all of it's propaganda. And 2 weeks go to the election, 110% is propaganda. I mean, it's just you can't watch it; it's unwatchable. All of it, and I'm not saying partisan. All of it is unwatchable. I had seen some good podcasts come up. It was Joe Rogan had some good guests, which I thought was. I actually, believe it or not, I actually like JD Vance's interview with Joe Rogan. I thought, I mean, you could love or hate Trump, but I think JD Vance is a throwback to old school debates, like when he debated Waltz. You know, takes me back to like John Kerry, who was a phenomenal debater. Like you go back and forth. Like Obama was a good orator, Kerry was a good debater. You know, people had their skills, right? You take it or leave it, but they had their skills. You know, Trump is good for creating energy and influence, you know, negotiation. Those are his skills. So everyone's got their skills. You can like him or hate him as people, but I'm a Massachusetts guy. Everybody's got a John Kerry story, and they're all bad. He is an awful human being. The stuff that I've seen personally or heard from friends or even my dad, who knew him when he was a assistant DA, he's like the stuff that he used to do. It would just make you cringe. But credit where credit's due. He was a phenomenal debater. JD Vance, I thought was a take back to old school debating when it was very formal. Of course, you know he's in Congress, so that's what they do. But like old school debater, I thought it was nice to watch. And his interview on Rogan, I thought was great because he was, well, yes, he was running for, you know, he's running on the Trump ticket, but I think a lot of his perspective was very neutral and kind of like, I get it. Here's what I believe, but I understand the other side. And, you know, it was more of like a joining back together. Like this party has been, this country's been fragmented on both sides. And I think he was the only one besides maybe RFK who's tried to like join the sides in some sort of a, in some sort of a way. Like you're trying to find like, all right, here's what you want, here's what we want, let's find common ground. And so there aren't many people who are speaking that language, right? Trump certainly isn't, Kamala certainly isn't, Waltz, I don't know, I don't listen to that guy, but Vance is one, and there's some others too, like, you know, that have kind of come together. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the election. The only thing that I hope is that they've already come out with 1.8 million registrations that are fraudulent, another 180,000 votes which are fraudulent in Pennsylvania, and I imagine there's massive voter fraud going on. And I just hope whoever wins, it's a clean sweep and it's not close. I do care who wins. I'm not going to say what I'm doing, but I do care who wins. But I would much rather have it be a clean sweep than to be undeclared or undetermined. I think that would be a disaster. I think the markets would not fare kindly, and it's starting to, you know, markets starting to soften a little bit, but it's not going to fare kindly for the markets. So I just hope that somebody wins a landslide so that we get it over with and move on.
I think that's the great transition to our conversation today is that uncertainty. If it's contested, it's going to be problematic on either side. And we've said this before, markets do not like uncertainty. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's directly correlated to it, but, you know, we've been talking about this for some time, but Warren Buffett obviously has raised a tremendous amount of cash. And most of that cash wasn't because he was making liquidation sales. Basically, it was because he had dividends he didn't have any place to put. So read into that differently than just, hey, oh, he's negative, he's raising cash. It's just, no, the market was expensive. But yep, there have been some more strategic sales that he's taken lately that have put him in a position of flexibility because, unfortunately, there is the possibility, I'm not going to say the probability, as I hope the same way you do, there's absolutely the possibility that this is going to end up contested in a way that's going to delay results and create suspicion and, you know, a lot, you know, and uncertainty and lots of negative. I mean, the worst thing that we can deal with again would be a popular vote and an electoral vote that are split, right? Because there's been lots of calls for, you know, eliminating the electoral vote because it doesn't match the popular vote. And there's great arguments, you know, for and against that. And I think it's there for a reason that's probably just as important today as it ever was. But, you know, unfortunately, that is right there, just a black and white example of uncertainty and dysfunction between those on other sides of the aisle. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I hope it's significant because at least we will then have a clear picture of what to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, and market uncertainty, it's a lesson to take away from this. I do want to point this into some actual stuff that people can take away from this in addition to that, which is, I'm trying to pull up the slide here for the audio viewers who get to miss this. But last week we had a non-farm payrolls come out, and I have to say it was ugly. Unless you're working for the government or healthcare or education. That was great. But if you're in manufacturing, professional business services, it was ugly. That's not a good sign. I think
Governments don't produce anything. They do pay a lot, though.
Well, here's the thing. As our economy has gotten weaker, more and more of that economy has filtered into the government. So if you think of basic economics 101, what they talk about is there's the theory that, well, if we go into recession, the government picks up the slack, right?
Keynesian.
And spends the money. Yes. And the government spends the money, right? And it fills the hole that's left from businesses. The problem is they only take half the equation, where they say, oh, it's supposed to fill the gap. And what the other half is, well, they pay it back and shrink it when the economy goes back to normal. However, the government never does that. They never shrink. As we know, big institutions never shrink. So one of the challenges that we find is that our government is getting bigger and bigger, and the private sector is getting smaller and smaller. It's still growing, but in comparison, the government should not continue to grow. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face. Like it or hate it politically, the reality is we can't afford to keep growing the government. The numbers are already well past the breaking point. I'm not sure that the system is solvable at this point. Like if you look at the numbers, and we'll get into some, but I did want to share this because I think it's really important to understand where the jobs are coming from and where they're going. And these are the areas where they're leaving. Here are the areas that they're coming. But you just have to recognize that we're in a precarious place economically. And here's another one I want to share here, which that was great. It's a great post by Jim Rickers. I don't know who actually did the chart, but basically the numbers are interest on the debt is now officially higher than what it costs for national defense. Think about that for a moment. It costs us more for the interest on our debt than it does to protect this country with the enormous amount of spending we have on national defense, right? I think we can all agree that it's probably 3 to 5 times more expensive than what it needs to be, but yet our interest is still higher.
Is Ukraine spending still is counted in there? Because that's not technically on our defense. I'm just curious.
No, I don't think it counts as national defense.
Either way, it's a sickening number. That interest is higher than what we are spending on the single greatest actual expenditure for the U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean, love or hate the fact that we have a military government. I know the Democrats used to be anti-war, and now all the wars are on their watch, and the Republicans are anti-war, which is weird because I grew up with Republicans being pro-war. I'm always anti-war regardless. But I think seeing that and seeing all these costs, Social Security, health, net interest, Medicare, national defense, everything else is a pittance in comparison. How do you fix the system? You've got 6.7 billion in outlays and you got 4.9 billion in receipts. There's no simple way to fix that. The only way you could do it is to slow down the spending, which is not going to happen. You can't pay down the debt. The only way you could do it conceivably is grow your way out of it, or you could do hyperinflation. You could inflate your way out of it, which is, I think, the government's preferred method. I don't particularly like that, but here's another one. Look at this. This is government current expenditures, interest payments. It has gone through the roof since, I don't know what this is, basically in the last 48 years, since COVID, we'll call it. It's gone through the roof, interest payments. That's not good. Not good at all. And think of it this way. I've seen this in the past, and I haven't seen one lately. I want to share it with the listeners because every time I see it, I love it. It's basically a comparison between a person's income and expenditures and the government. And the government's like 20x what a person is. It's not as bad as Japan. And I'm going to share this. Let's see.
Thank goodness, because Japan has other issues like their massively aging population.
Yeah, Japan's got a lot of problems that we don't have, thankfully. But I'm going to bring this one thing up because I saw this and I thought this is interesting. So here's another trend in our country that needs to change. So the boomers in our country won't give up the scepter of power, and the Xers, which is my and Doug's generation, won't take it. So it's both. It's a fault of both, right? The boomers won't give up power. You know, if you show here, this is a chart showing the United States has far and above more 60 to 70-year-olds, 70 to 80-year-olds, and 80-plus-year-olds that are legislators. I mean, it's crazy. We've got 45% of our legislators are above 61.
And Kirk, just to tag on to that, I just posted something up there for you. The U.S. average age of U.S. home buyers in the United States jumps to 56%, which means not only they're controlling the government, as we all know, they're controlling the wealth. Everything is in the control and the power of people 55 and up.
Yeah. So, you know, if you think about it for a moment, if you look at Japan, they're the next. But you know, you've got these other countries like Denmark and Austria and Colombia and Finland, New Zealand. They're all a lot lower. You know, it's part of the problem we're having in this country. We've got septuagenarians, octogenarians that are in power that clearly shouldn't be. I mean, no one's talking about the fact that Biden doesn't have his faculties and he's still president. No one's bothered to take the reins from him. He just like, oh, the old duffer, we'll just let him be. We got wars going on. I mean, the good part is it's nice that we have the luxury that we have to let that happen, but it shouldn't, right? You shouldn't be letting that happen. So we should be the Gen X, my generation, the latchkey kids. We want nothing to do with politics or power, and I think that's partially our fault for not taking the reins. Millennials are up next.
We never cared, and we still don't, Kirk.
Well, we see the facade for what it is. It's just not good. So, all right, let's see. Here we go.
Can I add something in because you were talking about the how do we get out of this? Right, we get out of this through growth, raising our GDP. Actually, it was a chart I just posted on there. It's U.S. federal tax receipts as a percentage of GDP. And in the 75-year history, so this is actually a chart that has some background, we can raise rates all we want, but no matter what, at least according to the data in this chart, no matter what we do, we will only get about 18 to 21.5% of GDP. And critically, the federal debt to GDP this high, tax hikes, which is something that we are hearing a lot of necessity around as an option to help raise this. By the way, you may have noticed politicians are all talking about reducing the deficit. Okay. Like that's like saying that inflation slowed down, right? Nobody's talking about actually reducing the debt. Reducing the deficit just means that we're going to lose less next year than we did before. This train is off the rails. But it said basically the tax hikes will cause the deficit GDP to rise and not fall. And this could be politically slated to, again, just to say this, but they used the example of the tax hike on the affordable health care, whereas the deficit to GDP rose in 2016. Basically, the point of this is that mathematically, unfortunately, the argument that we should tax a greater amount in order to raise the economy and put more money back in the system, basically there seems to be data indicating. And again, no chart is perfect, but indicating a diminishing returns. In other words, it will create an additional amount of pain with a decreasing amount of benefit.
So I think we can all agree, there's a lot of, a lot of fight on both sides about, higher or lower taxes. But here's one thing we can all agree on is that I think the people who are for low taxes in general would be okay with taxes being a little higher if they were spent efficiently. I actually 100%. I'm low tax. Like I don't want to pay any more taxes than I have to. I think a lot of people who are successful certainly don't want to pay more tax, and who can blame them, right? But I also understand I live in a society where we need to pay for things like roads and, police officers and things like that. But I think we would all agree, like, I'm okay paying taxes. Like, I'm not one of these cuckoos that say, well, I don't have to pay taxes. I think, we all kind of have to do that. But I will say this, I would actually have no issue with taxes going up if they were spent efficiently and effectively, but they're not. That's my issue. So I'm not willing to spend higher taxes because I know they're going to be wasted. I'm working really hard to put food on the table for my family and to give my family the best. And I'm just going to give the money to a spendthrift that's going to go out and blow it on, $10,000 toilets. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's the problem with the government. So I think if the government cleaned up its act and actually spent efficiently, and who knows, maybe a guy like RFK or Elon will go in there and fix things. I'm not going to hold my breath, but that's what they're talking about. Let's say that actually did happen. That'd be great. I think we could all feel a little bit more confident about government, Republicans and Democrats. But I think the challenge now is that it's all basically, you're just lighting money on fire. And that's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that. And I live in Minnesota, which is a pretty high tax state, Kirk. And then recently, I would argue that they've made some decisions that have been less than in the best benefit of expenditures, and it's gone from a surplus to a deficit. But I'll tell you again, going back further in terms of actually seeing it used well, a lot of the tax revenue that was brought in was put towards services that actually, again, you may agree or disagree with that, but the majority of the population of Minnesota felt beneficial from it. Things like, look, we always talk about fixing welfare and getting people off of it. One of the biggest problems with trying to get people off welfare is the fact that once they are able to exceed certain income levels, they take everything away, which, as we know, if you're below welfare, you're getting a lot more than just an income check. You're getting a lot of support. So one of the things that Minnesota had, and I forget the exact number, but I think if you were making under $50,000 in income, they gave free healthcare to children in the state, which, again, it helped parents to be able to continue to be motivated to make more money, but still be able to afford their their kids. And that allowed those people to be able to actually take a step forward and do something economically productive to society. So there are times in which money that is taken, of course, that's subsidized, obviously, through tax revenue, but there are times in which when money is taken, it has been used appropriately. I would say that is the minority of the time. And unfortunately, as we know, it ends up being something where that money does not get recycled back into increasing the GDP.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's so much waste. And it's not just in government, it's in healthcare. It's funny, somebody shared with me a chart, and I wish I had it here to share with the listeners, but I'll just explain it. The chart was this. If you look at all the industries out there, right? If you just compare the different industries, and I'll see if I can pull this chart up again. But where is it? If you look at the job sectors. So here we go. So if you look at different industries, this is not all of them, by the way. This is just, some of them. But if you look at the industries, which ones, actually, this is not all of them. If you look at the different industries, right, which are the ones that that are most efficient, and which ones grow quickest, which ones tend to do the best? It's ones that have the least government involvement, like technology, right? And which are the ones that are the slowest and the most inefficient and the ones least adaptable to change? Education, housing, what was the other one? There's another one here. I'm drawing a blank.
OnlyFans?
Healthcare.
Oh, wait, not that
one. Healthcare. So there was three of them. Anyway, the point being is the more government gets involved with business, the less efficient it is. The bigger it gets without being more effective. Like education. Do we need to have 20 schools with $20 billion endowments? Not really. Like, why do we need that? Is that creating a better good? I'm not saying education's bad. I mean, I'm sure they're doing a lot of good, but the point is you don't need $20 billion. Housing, and somebody was talking about this because they're talking about technology, like housing. You could legitimately build a 3D printed house now. You can also build a house that will show up and it comes pre-created and you unfold it. There's all these cool things that can be done. You can create a brand new house anywhere you want, a 3D printed house. And because of all the regulation, because of all the, I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying because of all the government oversight, it creates a slowness in terms of fixing it. So, look at nuclear. Nuclear is a perfect example. Nuclear is arguably one of the better, if not the best, clean energy sources out there, clean and cheap, better than anything else, in my opinion. And yet, we can't get a plant built in 20 years, mostly because of regulatory oversight. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be oversight, because I know someone's going to go crazy on me and say, oh, what are you saying? We shouldn't regulate nuclear? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it doesn't need to take 20 years to build a plant. It doesn't. I mean, you think about it, the only reason we're getting any progress in nuclear is because the tech companies realize that they're going to run out of energy soon. That AI is going to sap up all the energy, and if they don't find solutions quick, now they're going to be dead in the water. Oh, miraculously, now we're getting progress with nuclear. Go figure. If you don't think that money is what makes the government go around, you're kidding yourself. We talked about it in the show exactly when it happened. The green movement talk stopped, like across the board for weeks, and all of a sudden nuclear came out. Oh, nuclear is a solution. It was all coordinated and scripted. It's crazy.
Kirk, I'm going to tell you something. I always joke it's just about as equally regulated as nuclear energy, if not worse. It's the financial services industry. And a couple of years ago, under a different president, they were trying to propose something called the MIRA, M-I-R-A. Now, we've talked about this for a little while, Kirk, you and me, about asset classes and how asset classes perform under certain conditions. What has been one of the most volatile asset classes of the last 4 years?
Crypto.
Okay. Yes, that has been extremely volatile. I'm thinking volatile to the negative side.
Oh, to the negative side.
Although, depending on when you got into crypto, you might be saying the same thing.
That's both right there.
Yeah, right.
I don't know, Doug. Why don't you tell me?
Fixed income.
Oh, fixed income.
Fixed income and government bonds.
A few years
right?
ago. Yep.
So let's go back and understand what the MIRA was. So there's been a push forever to put more increasing level of regulation on the financial services industry and again, we always say, be careful what you ask for. If the protection in order to protect you, we're going to add this. It's created an incredible amount of legalese. If you ever try to do anything, just go look at the stack of legalese that's put there to get things done. That being said, I'm not going to go down that entire rabbit hole. I will say that, again, back in the days, there was less regulation, probably more cost, and a lot of those people have retired pretty successfully. So in some ways that kind of worked. But in order to continue to drive down what was available in the best interest of the consumer, and of course, in the best interest of making sure the consumer is taking care of themselves, and lastly, to make sure that the consumer is not getting taken advantage of, there was a proposal to create something called the MIRA, which was going to be a mandatory retirement account for basically all businesses had to implement this. And I think there was some caveats of the smallest businesses, but it was going to basically force very small businesses to have a mandatory funding plan and mandatorily take money from employees to force funding to save for themselves. Sounds great in a bubble. Here was the caveat of the fine print, Kirk. Guess what? 100% of the investment of all money that would have been taken from their paychecks and from the employer to match would have been put inside of the MIRA.
U.S. Treasuries.
U.S. Treasuries. Can you imagine if this had gone through over the last 4 years, what a absolute disaster this would have been for the majority of America? Okay. Because look at what's going on in banks right now. We've talked about the impact of banks, and I've got another chart in there, Kirk, if you want to pull it up, if you can find it. We've got plenty of them that talk about the trillions of dollars in unrealized losses that these banks are holding on to. And once again, trillions of dollars unrealized losses doesn't mean a thing if you don't need to touch the asset, right? Just let it ride. Eventually, those bonds will roll over. They'll mature. You'll get your money back. But if they're 20-year bonds, that's going to be an issue if you're waiting on it. And while the banks might be able to go 20 years waiting on those bonds to mature, if they get a run on and need liquidity, which, by the way, they have, thankfully, the government decided to lend more money to them, Kirk, to be able to get by this. But the average American wouldn't be able to do this. So imagine if everybody that was forced to have their money go into this now needed to retire and now needed to access those dollars in triple digit, quadruple digit loss category of the value. What an absolute retirement disaster. So again, another example of regulation. Be careful what you ask for, because in this circumstance, yes, it was for the common good. It was going to take everybody. Force that retirement that we woefully are behind on, and then make sure that you had a 50% loss guaranteed.
Well, this is why I put on the tinfoil hat for this comment, Doug, is because coincidentally, I believe the Myra was right around the time before we had the issues, before the rates started to go up, like right before, which coincidentally would have allowed banks to sell their stuff to more individuals. You know, when you get into the financial industry, and one of the reasons why Doug and I are always railing against our own industry is the corruption and the power. It's no different from government. You know, you have wealthy people with lots of money, and they're the ones funding the government and lobbying them and all that. So you have things like that that just make you go, isn't that interesting? Not going to say much more than, what a coincidence. So anyway, I want to touch on one thing. We got to wrap it up here. Actually, no, we don't. We got a little more time. So one thing I wanted to touch on here. One thing I want to touch on here, because we talk about, since we're talking about politics before we wrap the politics part up, this is the crypto sector corporations, and these are donations. So if you look here, you could see that the donations from the ones with the shaded area are from the crypto companies, but these are basically a huge amount have come from the crypto sector. If you think about like all of the donations that have gone in this last election, an enormous amount. And you could see, like, obviously Trump came out and said, yeah, we're for the crypto industry. Of course, Biden said that too, and they had people that were supposedly
careful what you ask for. Oh, sorry.
Right. Yeah. Supposedly they were in favor of allowing crypto to be a little more widespread, and of course they brought in somebody who also was supposed to be pro crypto and turned out not to be. So, you know, what's going to basically happen with crypto is whoever comes in, if they clamp down on crypto, it's going to move to another jurisdiction, another country, and we're going to lose billions of dollars of taxes because we will no longer be the crypto center of the world. It will go some other place. You know, there already are other places, but you know, there were other industries that moved to the UK. Not sure anyone wants to move their stuff to the UK right now. It seems to be a bit of a mess, but certainly that's a potential problem. Here's the other thing I want to mention, and then we'll kind of wrap up our chin wagon here a little bit. But I wanted to share this. Now, it's not quite a chart crime, but if you're looking at people who are spouting a narrative, keep this in mind. There are parts of the year which are better than others to invest. If you look at the worst parts of the year, according to this, it says May to October. So there's an old adage that says sell in May and go away. And basically what that means is the returns are going to be meager. So just take all your positions off the table and just wait. November to April tends to be the best time of the year. The other half of the year, coincidentally. I would actually argue that time frame has changed. It's switched a little bit in that it starts around. It's not May. It's kind of like June, July. It's kind of flipped a little bit. So I would argue that generally speaking, around mid-November until April is the best time of the year. So it's the recent data suggests that it's maybe moved a little bit, but it's good to know we're heading into one of the better parts of the year. Now, I haven't seen any sort of presidential stats, but if you look at the 4-year cycle, we're going to see what happens after this election. I'm holding my opinions till after. I think as long as the results aren't a flaming dumpster fire, I think we'll be okay. No matter who wins, the markets will go on the merry way because we've had 4 years of Biden. Whatever you think of it, we know what we're getting. We've had 4 years of Trump. No matter what you think of them, we know what you're getting. So unless it's unclear, I think the markets are going to be a whole lot of boring, results, and people be shocked at how uninteresting it is. But if we don't have a decided president after this, I do think things are going to get a little squirrely. So do what you can to manage the risk around that. But if I were you, I would just be very cautious going into tomorrow, and prepare yourself for a little bit of volatility. Did you miss your opportunity to get PPP money during COVID? Are you waiting for our president to forgive your student loans? Are you excited about helicopter money? Me too. If you want free money, look no further. I'm giving away free money this week on our show. All I ask is 5 or 10 minutes of your time. I'm so excited to give you free money, I can hardly contain myself. Take advantage of me and my excitement to get your free money. Go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. Follow the instructions today and get your free money. So I don't know if anyone saw this video, and frankly, I don't even know if it's true, but I didn't bother to care because it was hilarious. So according to this video, which I will put on a link to the website, it's Janet Yellen getting ready to speak, and then she starts to speak, and I forget what she says. She says something about the amount of debt, and the seal you can just barely see here. It says Department of the Treasury, falls off the podium. Like right when she says there's too much debt, the seal falls off the podium. I mean, it's too good to be real. Like it has to be a fake because it's just too perfect. However, that did happen with Abby Joseph Cohen, who was the chief investment strategist at Goldman Sachs at the end of 99. She closed out 99 with a gavel, and she broke the gavel. The gavel broke when she hit it. And I remember that, and that was like the turn, right? It was like all of a sudden after that 2000, the market started to veer into the ditch. But every time I see that, it just makes me laugh. So I'll put it on the website for those of you want to see the real version. But I had to share. It was just too perfect. Go ahead, Doug.
No, total tangent, has nothing to do with any of this. I did want to say, because I think we were I can't remember what we said beginning of the conversation, but we were talking about we're going back to the comedy, the comedy of the woman getting in James Bond. I did want to say in term, just something that has kind of shown significant improvement over those many years is I just saw a statistic about education, and I'm trying to find it here. I thought
the women outpace men, and
yes, thank you. Do you have it there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yep. So just thought it was an interesting statement. As you know, I'm always interested in the college and the education side of things, but women are now outpacing men in employment, in earnings. But it was really, there it is. Yeah. So women are outpacing men in college graduation. So you can see that that between 1970 and 2021, percent of adults ages 25 and older with a bachelor's degree. We are now looking, and the women are looking at being. See, I'm trying to read this again. What's the difference between these two charts? 25 and older. Okay, specifically for 25 and anyone older, you're looking at back in 1970. I mean, there weren't a lot of people with college degrees anyway. A lot of people went out of the war and went into the workforce. 14% of men had a degree, 8% of women. The women tailed men until roughly looks like the mid-20 teens. At which time the men fell below women, and they've started to expand the gap. Now, men are still obviously higher than they used to be. 37% of men have a college degree, but 39% of women have a college degree over the age of 25. So it's very balanced now where it used to be. What's interesting is the younger generation is significantly showing a gap there. So adults that are 25 to 34, so excluding anybody over 34, we are now seeing that 46% of women, which makes sense if they've caught if they've narrowed the gap, 46% of women now have a college degree, but only 36% of men have a college degree. So it's kind of the same averages in general. It has come up since, the mid 2000s, after being pretty steady from about the mid 70s. But unfortunately, if you look at the chart, and again, this only goes through 2021. Don't know where the trend is going, but the men's trend is dipping downward from that. So hopefully that's just a temporary blip, and both parties can continue to increase and go to a higher amount of degrees. And again, as college planning is something that I work on, only if those degrees are going to be effective and have a return on investment. And I think there's been a lot of talk about the tuition, for college being one of the greatest areas of inflation, the incredible challenge that's been for families, the trillions of dollars of outstanding student debt. Obviously, if you're going to go out and get that degree, it could be trade school, could be associate's degree, a certificate in something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 4 years degree. It doesn't necessarily have to be a graduate degree. If it does, hopefully whatever career that creates allows for a good return on that investment and ultimately a financial benefit for that decision. So,
yeah, I think we can all agree that we don't need to continue to dunk on men in favor of women. I think women are certainly exceeding men in many parts of society, and I think we can all kind of get along at this point. Well, that's my hope anyway, that we could just stop being sensitive to gender and to race and all this stuff, and we could just kind of get along with each other and just stop all the negativity. But I do think men certainly face some it's a different situation now than it was certainly when Doug and I were growing up, where we were kind of taught you need to be tough, and now it's a different culture for men. And I think men are struggle with identity somewhat because it's just not part of culture as it used to be. So I think we need to kind of rediscover that as a society as to what that means, because we have a whole generation of men that I think don't have that same identity. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up here in the interest of time. I don't want to get long in the tooth, and frankly, I gotta go look through all the political stuff because that's all I want to do as I'm addicted. That's a joke, by the way, for those of you who don't know me. I don't watch any of it.
You do need to do some research, Kirk, because if you're like me, it's like one of the, it's easy. I go in there. Okay, here's who's voting for, going for president. Got a pretty good idea of this person. Okay, here's who's going for Senate. Here's who's going for House. Then you get into the judges and the clerk of courts and the city people. I'm going. So on your ballot, you got 55 things to vote for, and this is unfortunate, but the average person is probably at or worse than me, where they go in there and like, I got 55 things to vote for, and I barely have enough knowledge to vote for 6 of them.
Yeah, so, I already voted, and I could tell you that some of the things in Massachusetts are better with the summaries, but then of course, if you rely on the summary, you don't read the language. Like some of the stuff, like somebody had just come out with something recently and said, well, the language on the vote has nothing to do with the law that's going to be written. So I nowadays it's just kind of like whatever. I still do vote, and I already did mine. So I don't have to go to the flaming dumpster fire that'll be tomorrow. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Doug, where can people find more about you?
Well, listen, if you are concerned about the cost of college, there's 2 things you need to know about. One is to get the cost down. Most people know about that. They know, hey, if I get scholarships or go to a supposedly cheaper public school, which, by the way, the secret of that, the myth is it isn't. There's a lot of money out there, and in many cases, private schools get it being less expensive. People know about that. They may not know how to do about it. Some people on here are probably like, I make too much money to be able to do anything about it, and I'm not, so what am I going to try for? The reality is that even if you make up to $300,000 in income, you could still possibly qualify for need-based aid, depending on the circumstances. But it's not just about getting the cost down. It's about how you pay for college. Right? So question, if you think your income's too high, what about tax credits? How do you get more free money? What other savings options might be better in light of circumstances than maybe a 529? How do you maintain or increase cash flow? What are appropriate funding strategies? Listen, how about after-tax income versus, retirement accounts versus other strategic ways to pay for college that could potentially save you up to a year or 2 in tuition just in different types of savings strategies. Listen, if you don't know about this, not everybody's going to need help picking a school to go to. Everybody needs help understanding how to pay for it. Because if you're not, I guarantee, although we're not allowed to make guarantees, financial circumstances, so I will mostly guarantee you are giving away more money than you should. And if that is something that you care about, no matter who you are, if you like to be smart about your money and make smart financial decisions, learn more how to pay for college, not just what to pay for college. Go to mergentcollegeadvisors.com, MERGENT, mergentcollegeadvisors.com. You can download our free report that it will not only tell you your SAI, and if you don't know what that means, it's critical. It's the student aid index, as well as scholarship comparisons. And ultimately, download our free easy college report right now. mergentcollegeadvisors.com.
Well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom with you. I know you didn't make a guarantee. I didn't hear it. What I heard was you highly suggested that that's probably going to happen. So you don't have to worry about that.
It was another language, and it just translated poorly.
Yes, I'm going to add a disclaimer. Doug did not guarantee that. Please don't listen to Doug. That should disclaim you. Anyway, thanks for coming on again, Doug. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.